Here is our writer for this week, Flannery O'Connor, and many of you will be shocked to learn that this is a woman. She's a woman. Flannery O'Connor is a female writer, and I know that's going to be a shock to some of you because some of you referred to her as he in your essays this week. The photo is in the public domain, no known copyright. Everything that rises must converge. The prompt was to debate whether Julian or the mother were the main characters. Either Julian or the mother could be seen as the main character. Number two, the prompt was meant for you to think critically about the story. It was not acceptable to say both were the main character because obviously both play a major role in the story. You really could not have the story without either of them. And a couple of people in your responses talked about both of them being the main character, and to me that was a cop-out, and it really wasn't the prompt. This was basically an intellectual debate. However, I liked your arguments for Julian being the main character since, as several people pointed out, we see the story from Julian's eyes and go into his thoughts. Those were excellent observations. However, there is evidence that the mother is central to the story, also because she instigates the action and serves as motivator for Julian's thoughts and his motivation for the tormenting of his mother. You may be wondering about the title, which could mean that the black race is rising and will eventually converge as they do on the bus. Revelation is a long story, and I'm sure some of you based the decision on which one you were going to write about by the length, unfortunately. But nevertheless, I hope you do read Revelation because it is an excellent story. It is absolutely perfectly structured, with the confrontation between Mrs. Turpin and Mary Grace coming exactly at the middle of the story. The rising action in the doctor's office leads up to the book throwing. After that, we see the consequences of that action in the rest of the story. I'm not going to repeat all of the characteristics of Gothic literature since I did that in the previous video, but you can see how all of the characteristics are evident in the story. They are outsiders, they're freakish, the descriptions are extremely vivid, from the ulcer on Claude's leg to Mary Grace's acne. These are not Hollywood people. The story, of course, deals with Mrs. Turpin's revelation. She thinks highly of herself to the point of arrogance and constantly looks down on everyone else. It is only when Mary Grace, what a perfect name, tells Mrs. Turpin that she is a warthog from hell. And of course, this leads to Mrs. Turpin's epiphany. She can't believe that she's herself and also a warthog. It's interesting how one person's comment can lead to such a transformation. The name leads, as I just mentioned, to Mrs. Turpin's epiphany, where she sees those whom she sees as lesser people ascending first to heaven. This to her is shocking. However, the big question is, has Mrs. Turpin changed? I want to read that last section of the story. There were whole companies of white trash cleaned for the first time in their lives, and bands of black N-word, I'm not going to say that word, in white robes, and battalions of freaks and lunatics shouting and clapping and leaping like frogs. And bringing up the end of the procession was a tribe of people whom she recognized at once as those who, like herself and Claude, had always had a little of everything, and the given wit to use it right. She leaned forward to observe them closer. They were marching behind the others. That's key. Marching behind the others, with great dignity, accountable as they had always been for good order and common sense and respectable behavior. They alone were on key, yet she could see by their shocked and altered faces, even their virtues were being burned away. She lowered hands and gripped the rail of the hog pen, her eyes small but fixed unblinkingly on what lay ahead. In a moment the vision faded, but she remained where she was. In other words, she sees that she's with them, but what she is burned away. And when she comes back to the present moment, it's interesting. In a moment, the vision faded, but she remained where she was. Has she changed? The narrative says she's remained where she was. At length she got down and turned off the faucet, and in a slow way on the darkening path to the house. In woods around her the invisible cricket choruses had struck up. I think it's interesting that it's a darkening path. She is oblivious to the crickets, but what she heard were the voices of the souls climbing upward into the starry field and shouting hallelujah. What a contrast. There she is on the ground. The others, the people that she has seen as inferior the entire story, are ascending to heaven shouting hallelujah. Poor Mrs. Turpin is left on earth. Great story, beautifully written. Thank you for listening.